The late-night air around the quiet halls of St. Helena General Hospital in San Francisco, California, buzzed with a strange tension that only a few could understand. Most of the staff knew it was a typical night shift. The soft hum of medical machines and the occasional urgent call button being pressed created the rhythm of their working nights. But there was more stirring beneath the surface, something that had been brewing for months, something no one had seen coming. For the hospital's residents and nurses, the professionals who roamed the halls had one story, but behind closed doors, another existed. That's what makes this case not only tragic, but unforgettable. It's the story of two people whose love turned into a tale of obsession, betrayal, and ultimately, murder. It all started innocently, as most love stories do. Dr. Oliver Hayes was the kind of surgeon everyone respected, tall, charming, and brilliant with his hands. He had a reputation as someone who could turn a failing surgery around, someone who commanded respect from his peers. He was always professional, until he wasn't. Then there was Isabella "Izzy" Green, a 32-year-old nurse who had recently transferred from a small clinic to the bustling hospital environment. Her dark brown eyes sparkled when she spoke, and she quickly gained a reputation among staff for being thorough, compassionate, and attentive. When Dr. Oliver and Nurse Izzy first started working together, it seemed like an ordinary professional relationship. They crossed paths in the operating room, during rounds, or in the break room sharing a cup of coffee. But over time, their casual conversations turned into something more, something deeper. Oliver found himself lingering at Izzy's station after rounds, making small talk, complimenting her. There was a mutual pull, something magnetic between them. They didn't try to hide it for long. Izzy would blush at his compliments. Oliver would go out of his way to ask for her during complicated surgeries. And soon enough, the two were sneaking around in places they shouldn't be. Dark corners of the hospital, an unused on-call room on the 3rd floor. The romance bloomed fast, like a wildfire. But what began as a passionate, secret romance quickly morphed into something far more dangerous. Izzy, who had been married briefly in her early 20s and vowed never to rush into love again, found herself overwhelmed by Oliver's attention. It wasn't just his charm. It was the way he made her feel, like she was the center of his world. He would text her constantly, find excuses to see her after their shifts, and soon, their relationship became an obsession. It wasn't long before Oliver started to exhibit signs that something was off. He had a way of keeping tabs on Izzy, asking where she was, even when she wasn't at work. He demanded to know who she was with, who she talked to. At first, she thought it was sweet, his protective nature flattering her, but soon it started to feel suffocating. One night, after an exhausting 12-hour shift, Izzy headed to a local bar with some friends from work. As the night went on, she noticed her phone buzzing repeatedly. Oliver was calling, asking where she was, who she was with, and when she would be home. His tone was sharp, and he wasn't the same loving doctor she had come to adore. Izzy reassured him she was fine, but his control was tightening around her like a noose. Days turned into weeks, and Izzy's excitement about the relationship was replaced by anxiety. Oliver's jealousy wasn't just limited to their personal time anymore. He began showing up at the hospital unannounced on his days off, giving her dark, possessive looks if he saw her talking to any male colleagues. The entire dynamic shifted. Where there was once love, now there was fear. One evening, after finishing an exhausting surgery, Izzy found a note slipped into her locker. "We need to talk. Tonight. My place." Her heart raced. She didn't want to go. She could feel the tension between them mounting, but something in her feared what would happen if she refused. As she approached Oliver's apartment later that night, the city lights of San Francisco glowing softly in the distance, she told herself it would just be a conversation. But when she stepped inside, everything changed. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension, and Oliver was pacing in the small living room. Oliver's eyes were darker than Izzy had ever seen them. There was no warmth, only anger and resentment. Without even greeting her, he began accusing her of cheating, of lying, and of seeing other doctors behind his back. Izzy, startled and shaken, denied everything. She had never betrayed him, but Oliver wouldn't listen. His voice grew louder, his accusations harsher. The calm, charismatic doctor was gone. All that was left was a man spiraling out of control. Izzy tried to reason with him, but it was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The more she spoke, the angrier he became. When she turned to leave, wanting to escape the growing danger in the room, Oliver snapped. He grabbed her arm with such force that she cried out. "You're not leaving me," he hissed through gritted teeth. Fear coursed through Izzy's veins, and she managed to pull away, but something had shifted in that moment. Oliver's possessiveness had taken on a violent edge. She ran from his apartment, her heart pounding in her chest, wondering how the man she loved had become someone she feared. The next few days at the hospital were unbearable. Oliver acted as if nothing had happened, but Izzy could feel his eyes on her constantly. She avoided him as much as she could, but her nerves were frayed, her sleep disturbed by nightmares of his anger. Something in Oliver had broken, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was in danger. She confided in a close friend, another nurse, who urged her to report the situation, but Izzy hesitated. How could she explain that the charming, well-respected doctor, Oliver Hayes, had turned into a man capable of violence? Who would believe her? Then, one fateful night, after a grueling shift, Izzy disappeared. Her car was found abandoned near a quiet stretch of road, her belongings still inside. The hospital staff was shocked, the police puzzled, and Oliver? He seemed oddly calm, too calm. As investigators dug deeper, the horrifying truth behind her disappearance began to surface. But the story was far from over. As the days stretched into weeks, the search for Izzy intensified. The San Francisco Police Department launched a full investigation into her disappearance, combing through every aspect of her life. Friends, family, and colleagues were questioned, but no one could pinpoint what had happened, except for one person, Dr. Oliver Hayes. To the investigators, he seemed too calm for someone whose lover had vanished without a trace. His composure, his perfectly rehearsed answers, and his unwavering demeanor raised red flags. Detective Ruth Navarro, a seasoned investigator with a sharp instinct, led the case. From the moment she sat across from Oliver in the dimly lit interrogation room, she sensed something was off. Oliver recounted his version of events. He hadn't seen Izzy in days, and their relationship had been strained due to work pressures. He claimed they were still on good terms and expressed concern for her safety, but there was a coldness in his voice that Detective Navarro couldn't ignore. However, without concrete evidence, Oliver was released. He returned to work as if nothing had happened, performing surgeries, greeting his colleagues, and continuing with his life. But whispers followed him through the hospital halls. Staff noticed the shift in the atmosphere. An unspoken fear hovered over them. It wasn't just that one of their own was missing. It was the way Oliver carried on, as though Izzy had never existed, as though she was just another patient who had come and gone. Back at the police department, Detective Navarro and her team scoured through Izzy's phone records, emails, and security footage from the hospital. They uncovered a disturbing series of messages sent by Oliver in the days leading up to her disappearance. The texts painted a darker picture of their relationship than anyone had imagined: jealousy, control, and threats veiled as concern. The final message from Oliver the night she went missing sent a chill through the team. "If you walk away, you'll regret it. You're mine, Izzy, forever." They had motive, but they needed proof. As the investigation continued, Izzy's friends came forward with more troubling details. One close colleague, Laura, recalled how Izzy had confided in her about Oliver's increasingly erratic behavior. Izzy had grown terrified of him, describing nights when Oliver would show up at her apartment uninvited, banging on her door, demanding to be let in. She had even considered quitting her job at St. Helena to get away from him, but the thought of leaving her career behind had held her back. With this new information, Detective Navarro shifted her focus to Oliver's apartment. They obtained a warrant and conducted a thorough search. What they found was chilling. Hidden in his garage was a blood-stained shirt, tucked away beneath a pile of old clothes. The blood was a match for Izzy's. It wasn't the smoking gun they needed, but it was enough to bring Oliver in for further questioning. When confronted with the evidence, Oliver's calm facade finally began to crack. His once steady hands trembled, and the smooth talk that had charmed so many began to falter. But even as Detective Navarro pressed him, Oliver denied everything. "I don't know how that shirt got there," he said, his voice strained. "I didn't do anything to her." But the cracks were showing, and Navarro knew she was getting closer to the truth. She had seen men like Oliver before, men who thought they were untouchable, men who believed they could control everything, even the women they claimed to love. Meanwhile, the investigation took a shocking turn when a witness came forward. A jogger, running through a remote park just outside the city, had spotted a figure late one night around the time Izzy went missing. The figure had been dragging something heavy, and though the jogger hadn't thought much of it at the time, after seeing news reports of Izzy's disappearance, they felt compelled to speak up. The location matched the area where Izzy's car had been found, and the description of the figure, tall, broad-shouldered, matched Oliver. The police immediately expanded their search to the park. Days of scouring the wooded area led to the discovery no one had wanted, but everyone feared. Buried in a shallow grave under a canopy of trees, they found Izzy's body. She had been strangled, the bruises on her neck clear evidence of the violence she had endured. The hospital's bright-eyed nurse, full of life and promise, had been reduced to a tragic statistic in the hands of someone she had trusted. When news broke that Izzy's body had been found, the hospital was thrown into turmoil. The staff, who had once admired and respected Dr. Oliver Hayes, now recoiled at the thought of him. The once charming surgeon had become a monster in their eyes, capable of unspeakable horrors. Back in the interrogation room, Oliver was confronted with the undeniable truth. The evidence was overwhelming. The texts, the blood-stained shirt, the witness, and now Izzy's body. But even as the walls closed in on him, Oliver refused to admit what he had done. "It was an accident," he muttered through clenched teeth. "She was going to leave me. I couldn't let her." It was in that moment that Oliver's carefully crafted image of the perfect doctor, the perfect lover, crumbled. His obsession with Izzy, his desperate need to control her, had driven him to commit the ultimate act of violence. In his mind, if he couldn't have her, no one could. And so, in a moment of rage and jealousy, he had taken her life. The trial that followed was a media frenzy. People couldn't believe that the man they had once trusted with their lives in the operating room was now being tried for murder. But as the evidence was laid out in court, the chilling texts, the physical evidence, and the emotional testimonies of those who knew Izzy, the jury had no doubt about Oliver's guilt. In the end, Dr. Oliver Hayes was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The once respected surgeon would spend the rest of his days behind bars, haunted by the memory of the woman he had claimed to love. For those who knew Izzy, her death was more than just a tragedy. It was a reminder of how quickly love can turn into obsession, how passion can spiral into violence. At St. Helena General Hospital, a memorial was held in her honor, a tribute to the vibrant nurse whose life had been cut short by the very person she had trusted the most. As the years passed, Izzy's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most outwardly perfect relationships can hide dangerous secrets. And for those who worked alongside her, the memory of her bright smile and kind heart would forever linger in the halls of the hospital, a reminder of what they had lost. True crime case. Resolution would like to thank you for staying with us through this chilling story of love, betrayal, and murder. We hope that Izzy's story serves as a solemn reminder that behind every tragic headline is a life, a heart, and a future stolen far too soon.